Before listening, please keep in mind that we will be openly discussing experiences with stigma. So if you do not wish to take part, please be mindful of our content. If you still wish to take part, there will be a transcribed version of the podcast to be released soon. Hello, everyone. My name is John, and I'm your host for today, and I'm joined with.
Hi, my name is Anika, and I am going to be the other host for this podcast today. And now you're tuning in to TeaPH Time.
Yes, and TIFF meaning Tea with the Initiative Philippines. If you don't know what happens in Tea with the Initiative Philippines or TIFF time, Anika.
Okay, so I think it's time to spill the tea on Project Kusog.
Yeah, and so Project Kusog is a new initiative from the Department of Marginalized Community Action, DMCA, at TIFF, aka the Initiative Philippines, our nonprofit organization that aims to address various issues surrounding community development such as poverty, exclusion, vulnerability, and insecurity. We want to make community development accessible to all the youth in the Philippines. With that said, Anika, let's talk a bit about Kusog.
Okay, so actually, I'm very curious. So, do you know why we came up with Project Kusog and why was this project made?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So for our listeners, guys, Kusog means lakas in Waray or Bicolano. And this series or this episode was made to raise awareness on relevant issues faced by persons with disabilities. That's why we're here today with a podcast for you.
Yeah, so that's what Project Kusog, this podcast, is about. So now that you guys know what this is, it's time for us to move on to our topic of the day.
Yes, so Project Kusog presents to you Stories Untold. Today we'll be listening to important stories from PWDs, from stigma and microaggression to moving towards advocacy.
Of course, we can't have a podcast without speakers, so shall we begin and introduce them?
Definitely. I'm really excited for today's episode. Now, our first speaker, guys, is an accessibility advocate, the very first person in the Philippines to earn a master's degree with a visual impairment. And he's currently the Batangas Governor's Advocate on Disability Affairs. Let's all welcome Sir Ronnel del Rio. Hello po, sir. Nandiyan po ba kayo?
Yeah. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting us.
And
Yes.
our second speaker for today is a mental health advocate, the founder and chairperson of Habong, a Calamba mental health initiative that was established last June 2019. So now let us all welcome our second speaker for today, Ms. Cheenee Astilla.
Hello, good afternoon. It's an honor to be here.
No, it's an honor po to be with the two of you. Kamusta po kayong dalawa? How are you doing today?
Yeah, ako yun pa rin, cute pa rin.
I wish I could say the same for
Of
myself.
course. She's cuter actually.
Thank you po. I'm actually very nervous po because I feel like I'll come up short sa mga sagot ko later, but I'm still looking forward to sharing my experiences with all of you guys.
No worries po, ma'am. I'm pretty sure that everyone here who is in the podcast is very ready to listen to any of what you guys are going to be saying.
Yes, and we are so thankful po again for your time and your willingness to share your experiences. This podcast, guys, to all our listeners, will be a conversation with our speakers about their experiences regarding issues related to PWDs. Now, with that said, again, we want to thank our audience, our organizing team, and our speakers because this project would not have been possible without all of you. Now, Anika, shall we start the interview or the conversation?
Yes, so I think that's enough introduction for our speakers. I think it's time for us to get the ball rolling.
No, yeah, okay. So, Sir Ronnel and Miss Cheenee, no, as our speakers, I think the first step in this conversation is to hear a bit about your stories. Pwede po ba magpakilala muna po kayo sa ating mga listeners? Kayo muna po, Sir Ronnel, that's Miss Cheenee.
Ganon, akala ko muna, beauty first eh. Anyway, sige, ako si Ronnel del Rio. Ako ay taga Batangas. I studied elementary and high school sa Philippine National School for the Blind. Had my baccalaureate course at the Philippine Christian University, master's at De La Salle Lipa. And right now I'm taking up doctorate in public administration at Lyceum of the Philippines, Batangas.
Kayo po, Miss Cheenee?
Hello again, good afternoon. I'm Francine Astilla. I'm like what Anika, Miss Anika said, I'm a mental health advocate, the chairperson and founder of Habong, a Calamba mental health initiative. I decided to form the organization because I myself am suffering from a mental health disorder, and I take it as a coping mechanism to help others as well.
Mm-mm, mm-mm. Well, yeah, thank you for those introductions, po, speakers. For Sir Ronel, no, I think a big part of your story is really about pursuing education as someone with visual impairment. Can you share
Mhm.
po a bit more of your experience about, taking your masters, going to school?
Yeah, actually, there's nothing unusual about it except for the fact that I am using Braille and other audio materials because that's how blind students or learners should manage our education. And perhaps the only difference that I had is I have had my elementary and high school in a residential school, meaning naka-dorm kami doon from Monday to Friday, tas inuuwi lang kami pag weekend. So hanggang high school, ganon. Unlike yung ibang mga bulag, sila ay nakasama sa mga regular school. So sa tawag ng DepEd regular students, so naka-mainstream sila sa mga sighted, sa learners who are not disabled. So, yung sinabi nyo kanina na ako yung first na nakakuha ng master's course na bulag, siguro sa Batangas, totoo yun. Tsaka siguro sa Region 4A. Pero sa Pilipinas, marami na hong bulag na nagmasteral. Mayroon na rin pong ilang nagdo-doctorate. Pero siguro dito sa Region 4A, baka totoo yung gano'n. Ano? And we're very privileged to be supported by generous sponsors like Senator Recto and Governor Vilma Santos Recto, two of my most, kumbaga, ay well-known advocates po sa buhay ko. So they supported me and they made sure that I'll be landing in a good employment.
I see po. Interesting po, no, you mentioned your high school and grade school was a different type of school compared to, what we call regular schools. And marami po sa ating listeners, we could
Different
say,
in a sense that yun lang,
Mm.
puro kami bulag doon, pero yung curriculum na ginagamit, pareho lang ng curriculum ng elementary high school. Except na yung amin ay yung ibang methodology na pagtuturo, like naka-braille kami, more on audio, ganon.
Mm-mm-mm. Marami po kasi sa ating listeners in this podcast ay siguro mga high schoolers or mga estudyante. Learning environment. Yung iba niyo pong kasama, no, ay also blind din. Tama po, no?
Yes, yes, yes. Oo. Siyempre masaya kasi lahat kayo bulag, no? Oo, yung kumbaga ay you develop your own culture, may mga peculiar experiences na siguro kayo din nung elementary at high school ganun din, but you have your own way of having it. We had our way also. So, but yung experiences na maraming mga experiments tayo nung bata, nanligaw, nakakrush, lahat yon na naranasan din namin at pinagdaanan din yung high school life. May mga advocacies din na sumulpot during the high school days. Tingin ko naman nagkaroon kami ng complete student life nung elementary and high school.
Mm-hmm. So Anika, no, like hindi naman ganun ka iba yung experience nila. It's really just the experience of blindness that's different. At yung may iba lang silang needs sila, sir.
Yes, I agree. I think for you po, Sir Ronnel, you're very commendable po despite, your disability. But I don't want to call blindness a disability
Why
because
not?
I think that people who are blind are still
Mhm.
as powerful and should be as heard as much as anybody else. And I feel like, why do we need to always separate people based on what they don't have when we should focus on what they already have, and we shouldn't be stigmatizing them for that? Do you agree in person?
Yes, and that's the attitude for us persons with disabilities, and to you persons who don't have disability. We should not isolate ourselves, or you should not isolate us, and we should not isolate ourselves from you, because you guys are all you're cool guys. I mean, so to those young people out there, do not deny yourselves of the opportunity to associate and mingle with this people. They may be, or there may be some who will reject you, but don't mind them. No, the majority will accept you as you are.
I agree po, Sir Ronnel. Thank you so much for telling us your experiences naman po. So, it's time for us to move on to Miss Cheenee. So, you stated po that you are a mental health advocate and you have started your own initiative. So, based on that, what do you think, since we know that the Philippines mental health is still highly stigmatized here, so what do you think are some of the challenges that you've experienced as an advocate for this specific issue?
Well, you mentioned that stigma is still prevalent in our country surrounding mental health. So I think that's the first and foremost problem that we deal with when advocating for mental health is the awareness, raising awareness for that, and especially accessibility sa information about mental health because most of this will be found online in English pa. And, mental health disorders don't discriminate. It can target anyone, whether you're rich or you're poor, and whether it can target anyone. So I think that was one main problem as well because we want to help as many people as possible. But since we're just beginning, it's going to be difficult to address the problems of those who don't have access to us and also who don't have access to information. They're not even aware that mental health disorders are a thing. So they just pinabaliwala na lang nila. So how will they recognize that they have a problem if they're not informed of that? It's one of the major problems that I really want to address. But again, as we are still beginning, it's still very difficult to do so.
I agree po, ma'am. So you said about how, it's how are people going to discover if they have these certain mental health disorders. So, a personal question po, how are you able to self-actualize or how are you able to know that, something was wrong or what was your personal experience living with a mental health condition? And so for the people who are listening to the podcast, what would that be? What is your mental condition po?
I think when I was in junior high school, I made the mistake of, well, I never really self-diagnosed, but my friends would do that to me. Like they tell me I have anxiety, but I've never taken it seriously. I didn't go to a doctor yet, but it wasn't until when I was in my senior year of high school and it was affecting other aspects of my life, such as I wasn't able to go to school anymore because it was so nakakaabala na siya sa buhay ko talaga. Like, I was too afraid to face my classmates, my teachers. I even skipped an exam. I was eating so much that, I was overeating. That's when I feel like if it's affecting other aspects of your life, then you have to go and seek help. I know that that's difficult for some for practical reasons such as financial incapability and not even just that but also inaccessibility and even they're afraid that they might be judged, but that's our goal here is to destigmatize everything about that, to let them know that it's okay to seek help, there's nothing wrong with that.
I agree po that, it's not time for us to divide. It's time for us to, seek help when it's needed. So, you stated po that a lot of Filipinos are not learned. Wala po masyadong maraming alam tungkol po dito. So, knowing that majority of mental health disorders also belong in the sector of persons with disabilities. So, what are the important implications of this for the said sector?
I think that it doesn't differ from the other sectors of PWDs. But yeah, since the stigma is more prevalent or not, I don't know if it's more prevalent, but there is a stigma surrounding specifically mental health. Hindi nila ma-enjoy yung privilege. But other than the privileges, I think what's more important is their rights aren't protected or they don't know that their rights can be protected by the law and other stuff. So if they're not aware that, oh, we're protected by the law pala, then they might feel isolated and such.
I agree po, ma'am. Sometimes kasi mental disorders do not show physical impairment, but it's still emotional. So we still need to take it seriously. So Kuya John, do you have anything to say right now?
No, yeah. I was listening to Miss Cheenee, no, and I heard she mentioned about legal sort of support or resources. And I just thought po, no, kay Sir Ronel about the blind community. Sir, ano po ba yung mga provisions natin sa bansa natin, that support blind people, how we can make a more accessible country for them, ganun po. May ma-share po ba kayo?
Yeah, may accessibility. Meron tayong accessibility law, yung BP 344, pero it talks about the built environment, no? Actually, nasa Kongreso ngayon, timely, do sa committee ni Congresswoman Arroyo, pinag-uusapan yung amendment sa BP 344. Hopefully, this will cover accessibility on technology kasi ako, lagi ko sinasabi with all due respect to our government, I'm from the government also, a government employee, but the number one violator of accessibility law is our government. No? Look at their buildings, look at their websites. They're very insensitive to the needs of persons who are reading impaired or blind and visually impaired. No? Their websites are not accessible. Well, hopefully LaSalle's website is accessible and other private schools because it's an international practice already. The universality of things. So like the reason why iPhone is very popular is because it can be used by everybody. That's what we call an example of a universally designed equipment can be used by everybody. And we wish that accessibility in this country will start to include everybody. So that's one. And of course, we have the Sight Saving Month in August, wherein we are highlighting the things that that persons who are blind can do. We wish that that will not happen only in August, but a year-round promotion of the things that can be done by not only the blind, but of course for persons with disabilities. We have the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And in the United States, you have a very strong group, which is the American Foundation for the Blind, the American Federation of the Blind. And in the Philippines, we have here the Philippine Chamber of Massage Industry of the Visually Impaired, because you see, massage is still the most sought employment for the blind. So, ikinakahon kami ng gobyerno na kung hindi namamalimos, kumakanta, nagmamasahe. Yun daw lang magagawa ng bulag. Pero marami hong nagagawa ang bulag na kung minsan hindi matanggap ng nakakakita, na kaya palang gawin ng bulag. Yung gang sinasabi, akala ko bulag yan si Ronnel. Bakit ganyan? Parang hindi naman yata bulag, niloloko yata kami. Parang ganon. So, hindi natin maintindihan kung where's yung disability namin, wala na kayong magagawa doon. But if you remove the barriers, yung halimbawa, kita nyo nang may dadaang bulag, ito kasalanan yung gawin yung itong mga nakakakita, parang mannerism na ninyo. Kita nyo nang dadaan yung bulag, hindi pa kayo tatabi. Tapos pag nabangga kayo, ay binangga kami ng bulag. So yung mga ganon sana, just be sensitive and considerate, at least considerate. At sabi ko nga, pag tinanggal nyo yung barriers, wala nang disability. Kay pilayan, kay bulag, kay with mental condition, wala na yun. Basta isipin ninyo, bulag na yung tao. So wag nyo nang hanapang tingnan kayo or whatever. Yung pwedeng magagawa, yung mga barriers, yung mga babanggaan niya, tanggalin na ninyo. At wala na tayong pinag-uusapang disability. Pare-pareho na tayo. Ronnel is a person like you who just happened to be blind.
Opo. Ayan, so really appreciate that sentiment that behind the disability at the end of the day is ultimately a person. So lahat po ng kaya nga po PWD, diba? Persons with disabilities. Hindi
Persons
ibig sabihin
first.
Persons first. Okay. Hindi ibig sabihin na bulag yan o may mental health condition yan na yun na yung buong pagkatao na lang. Hindi po.
Yung pa isang sinasabi, no? Bakit tayo tuwan-tuwa tayong sabihin blind or visually impaired, but ay saan sabihin bulag. Eh, yun ang Tagalog ng ng walang ng ano eh, 'di ba? Walang paningin o yung iba ginagawa differently abled, 'di ba kami kumakain ng daga. Kami po ay persons with disabilities. Hindi po kami differently abled, hindi po kami with extrasensory whatever. We are persons who happen to have a disability.
Natawa naman po ako. Natawa po ako dun sa daga.
Ang dami kasi
Okay po.
ang dami kasi tinatawag ng gobyerno, ng sosyudad, ng simbahan na akala nila pinagsisilbihan nila kami. Pero sa totoo lang, loob ninyo yung pinapagaan ninyo, hindi yung sarili namin.
Kayo po ba, Miss Cheenee, Ate Cheenee, what do you think po about the barriers naman for people with mental health conditions? Kasi po, diba, from my understanding, when we hear mental health conditions, parang isipin natin, ay, yung tao na to baliw, ay, itong tao na to pupunta sa therapist o sa psych. Ano po ba yung barriers na napapansin niya for people with mental health conditions?
Like we've mentioned earlier, yung stigma, and an example of that is pag sinasabi na, ay, nasa isip mo lang yan, when in reality, maraming factors na nakakaapekto ng mental health disorders. And it's true, nasa isip namin yan, but it doesn't make it any less real. Nasa isip namin to, pero totoo ito, at maaaring, we may have inherited it from our family, it may have been triggered by an event, but it's very real and it can lead to severe consequences if not addressed properly. And another one is yung pag sinasabi na think positively. I don't deny that it's important to think positively, but they say it kasi as if it's the only way to treat it, as if we don't need professionals to help us out. So yes, thinking positively is very important, but that's just a step towards recovery, but not the only step. So I think that's something that we should keep in mind.
Validation is a big problem. Like many people don't validate the realness of the mental health conditions that people experience. Ikaw ba, Anika, have you experienced some time when your parents maybe have invalidated your feelings or stress, or what do you think?
I guess, of course, part of growing up is finding out that your parents are not the most perfect beings and wanting to keep that ideology na they're just gonna be always there for you. Pero totoo naman talaga na, may pagkakamali yung mga ibang tao. Pero, sometimes talaga, it happens. Pero, I know that it's something that I can resolve, or if I can't resolve it, then I know that these things may be giving me a chance to, challenge myself. But this is also one thing po for Miss Cheenee. We know a lot of people will say na this is just God's plan, that this is just something that, will make you stronger. How do you tell people that it's not necessarily always like that po?
When I say that it's been affecting other factors in my life na, and I have no control over it. What I think what they don't understand is that they think that we have control over it, and gusto nila like physical impairments, my like scientific proof or physical proof or evidence. And there is, but hindi naman, like, why do we have to provide that? I think really it's just, we really just have to raise awareness how frustrating it may be. It may be so frustrating kasi it might take a very long time for some people to completely understand it. But there's no other way than to raise awareness and to make them understand that we have no control over it whatsoever, but we can treat it with the help of a professional or medication or whatnot.
Ayan po. So, thank you so much po, Miss Cheenee and Sir Ronnel. So, we have officially reached the halfway point of our conversation. So, we'll just take a quick break and listen to a few words from our partners. The Department of Marginalized Community Action of the Initiative Philippines presents to you its legacy projects: Project Lumad, Project Dumagat, and Project Pagsibol. Project Lumad aims to provide care packages to Lumad students and teachers in the Bakwit School situated at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and to help them in claiming their right to education. Project Dumagat campaigns against the Kaliwa Dam project and assists Dumagatites affected by the pandemic. Lastly, Project Pagsibol works hand-in-hand with the Scarecrow PH to bridge ang Baguio farmer communities and markets through their coffee products. If you wish to help, donate, be part of, and stay updated with the following initiatives, you can check our Facebook and Instagram pages.
Welcome back, guys, to TIFF Time, Tea with the Initiative Philippines, our podcast, with today's episode being about PWDs and their issues, destigmatization. So now we are at the second half of our conversation. Anika, what do you think of the conversation so far?
I think that it was a very, very productive conversation, and I hope that the listeners would also say the same thing so that they could, if they have any questions on mental disabilities or, these things that we are talking about, I hope that this podcast will help you resolve those issues so that you guys may be able to advocate as well for these certain issues. Ayan.
Hindi pa rin ako mag-get over sa sinabi ni Sir Ronnel na wag natin itrato ang mga tao na may kapansanan, mga disabled people or people with disabilities rather, na kumakain sila ng daga. Sila pa rin ay mga tao.
daw eh.
Ayun po. Everything said, no. Again, marami po sa ating listeners kasi talaga ay mga kabataan, mga youth, lalo na yung mga nag-volunteer o mahilig sa mga advocacy, no? So, ano kaya yung pwede namin gawin bilang mga kabataan para mas lalo pang i-support yung mga communities of people with disabilities? Kunwari yung mga bulag po.
Pag may rally, sasama niyo yung mga bulag. Kasi mas malamang tapos ilagay niyo sa unahan. Kasi hindi kayo kakanyonin ng water cannon ng police. Ay, may bulag na kasama yun nasa unahan.
Ginawang shield.
Ginawang shield. Pero okay. Hindi, sa totoo lang, isama nyo lang, you mainstream, you include these people, your fellow youth with disabilities kasi they have many things to say and they can do, pag na-develop nyo yung teamwork sa bawat isa, napakasaya kasi naintindihan ko naman kayo mga kabataan kasi nung araw, diba, hindi natin maraming takot sa bulag o kaya takot sa may mental health condition kasi nga ang conditioning ng isip natin, mga guro, mga magulang natin, naku, kay lalapit yan, bulag yan. Naku, sige, kakagating kayo, whatever. Siyempre, yung tendency naman ng mga bata is, oo nga, no, yung iba naman, kawawa naman, ganun. Sasabihin pa ng pare, pagdasal natin si Ronnel, kasi hindi po sakit ang disability. Hindi po yan sakit. Yan po ay isang kondisyon na kung sabi ko nga sa inyo, wala na tayong magagawa. Pero kung tanggalin natin ang barriers, tanggalin niyo yung takot, tanggalin niyo yung alangan, huwag kayong magsasabi, huwag kayong mahihiya. Halimbawa, Ronnel, nakita mo ba yung pelikula kagabi? Ang ganda, no? O Ronnel, nanood ka ng TV? Oo, napanood ko yung balita kagabi. Normal po yun. Tama po yun. At saka yung pa isa, do not call us abnormal and you are normal. I mean, that's so stupid and silly. Wala naman, walang ganonan. Pare-pareho tayong tao. So, yung mga gaya ninyo na nakakakita, na walang kapansanan, wala kayong kapansanan. Kami may kapansanan, pero pare-pareho tayong normal. Because in one way or the other, meron kaming kahinaan. At hindi tayo naging abnormal nun. Kasi bahagi yun ng pagiging tao. It's part of our being human. At yun ay dapat matutunan nating tanggapin yung kahinaan ng bawat isa. Pag natanggap natin yun, pare-pareho tayong lalakas.
Miss Cheenee, ikaw naman po, what can you say po in addition to that? No, how can we sort of parang break that stigma against people with mental health conditions? Pero specifically po, parang how can we sort of encourage other youth to be more accommodating to people with mental health conditions? Ano po ba yung mga best practices na ma-recommend niyo?
Okay, so I have like 2 steps na comprehensive na siya of all the other steps you need to take. And I think 1 is raising one's awareness, and then 2 is spreading that awareness to other people. So raising one's awareness includes research kasi how you can treat other people, mahahanap siya online. Although I understand not everyone has access to the internet, that is where step 2 comes in. But yes, if you do have the capacity to research online, please do so. Makikita yan sa internet and make sure na reliable yung sources nyo. Please check how to interact with other people, how to not invalidate their feelings. And then, like what I said, step two, spreading awareness is naman, what we're doing. What we're doing right now, what I'm doing with our organization, para ma-make sure din na offline din, aware din yung people, lalo na sa mga walang access sa internet. And I think what we're missing is kailangan din talaga natin manawagan sa ating gobyerno na i-address din tong mga aspetong ito, pati na rin yung ibang aspects na hindi natin aakalain na may effect sa mental health or sa other factors, but actually they do have implications. For example, mga financial crises, they do have effects sa mental health natin. So I think the government really has to be an active participant in addressing this. So we have to continuously call for our government to do something. So step one, to summarize what I said, step one, raising one's awareness. Step two is to spread that awareness to other people, and pati na rin sa government natin. Ayun po.
I agree. I want to share, guys. Meron po kasi akong friend na meron siyang bipolar disorder. Hindi ko lang po alam what specific type of bipolar disorder, pero this is just one instance of a friend telling me their personal struggles, and even if they have that condition, it does not change anything between our friendship, or it does not change the way that I should treat them, no? And I will be more patient and accommodating to his needs kasi alam ko naman mahirap po yung ganitong type of condition. So hopefully our listeners can also reflect a bit. Kung may kakilala kayo, parang give people around you a safe space for opening up about their struggles. And kung mag-open up man sila, wag natin sila tratuhin na abnormal. Kasi nga, kagaya sabi diba ni Sir Ronnel, hindi tayo magkaiba porket may kapansanan yung isa. So, ikaw ba, Anika? I'm gonna throw it back to you. Thoughts, feelings, reactions.
I completely agree naman, syempre, na lahat naman ng sinabi nila. And very much agree na, we need to be more welcoming to people, di lang dahil iba sila sa atin, hindi dahil they have something that we do not have doesn't mean that we need to treat them differently or we need to distance ourselves from them. So, meron po kaming tanong po, di ba Sir Ronnel? Sabi niyo po kanina na minsan kapag naglalakad po kayo, yung mga nakakakita, minsan naglalakad rin po sila kung saan po kayo naglalakad. So, and then for Miss Cheenee po, sometimes people would distance themselves from people who they know have disorder. So, we know that those things might be a bit negatively implicating on you, sa inyo po na nakakaramdam po nun. So, how do you think should we react na lang po when we encounter someone that has that? Po. And we might not realize that we're actually doing something wrong. So, paano po namin masasabi sa inyo na parang, how do we learn on our own as well? How do you help us learn with that?
Sa internet, may masi-search kayo na 10 courtesy rules on dealing with blind persons. No? Pag-aralan nyo yun, magandang matutunan nyo kahit paano. Yun nga yung isa doon, yung don't hesitate to use see or watch or look. Kasi common sense naman yun. Alangan naman sabi, oy, nakapa mo ba yung, of course, kung gumagamit kayo ng words na gano'n. Tapos, pag may nasa kwarto, syempre pag may bulag kayong kasama, sasabihin niyo kung sino yung sa bulag, kung sino yung mga nandun sa kwarto. Ganyan. Oh? At huwag kayong aalis pag nagsasalita pa yung bulag. Minsan, daldal na nanda, wala na pala yung kinakausap mo. Yung mga ganong basic. And others, so makikita ninyo, just search for it sa internet, yung 10 courtesy rules for blind persons. Again, always think of the person first perspective. Kung sinasabi nyo sa inyong mga kapwa walang kapansanan na kayo ay huwag lumayo, sinasabi rin namin sa aming fellows with disabilities, huwag kayong lumayo sa mga taong walang kapansanan. Paano tayo makakatutuhan? Totoo yun eh. You don't isolate us. Kaya ako, di ba, ako yung housing czar sa Batangas. Hindi ako pumapayag na magkakaroon ng village for persons with disabilities. No. Sa akin, kailangan nakahalo. Included. Inclusion is the name of the game in all aspects of our lives.
Agree.
We are all together.
Agree po. Tsaka pag inclusive po, hindi po ibig sabihin na you just add them to the conversation.
Definitely, ma'am.
Means that
Thank
you
you.
have to also take into account their needs because they are
Yes.
still people. I agree po. So to Miss Cheenee po, so
And person with disabilities also should think the same. Hindi yung kasi maraming bulag na porke alam na pagbibigyan sila ay bulag, sige, hindi naman tayo anuhin yan. Nang-aabuso rin. Kaya beware din kayo ha. Kasi maraming bulag, lalo yung mga ibang lalaki. 'Di ba? Pag lalo hindi kayo marunong mag-guide ng mga bulag, 'di ba? May ibang mga bulag na sinasamantala. O ingat kayo doon. Maraming bulag na abusado at maraming bulag ding bastos. Parang yung mga tulad din ninyong mga walang kapansanan, marami ding ganon. So, meron ding ganon po sa sektor namin. At natural po yun sa tao.
opo, na porket po na may, that you are a PWD doesn't mean that you're exclusively not going to be affected by the law. Syempre, same when naman kung, di ba? So, for Miss Jeannie po, we have a story po kasi na somebody encountered someone with autism before, and in an effort to not agitate this person, they purposely avoided eye contact and they distanced themselves from that person. So, for that po, na minsan they want to do something pero hindi po nila alam kung ano po dapat ang kanilang gagawin. So, how do you think that those people should have reacted so that the person who had autism, would feel more welcomed?
I honestly have not been in constant contact with someone with or someone in the autism spectrum. So I don't know what would be the effective way. So I think the main step here is to just really do your research and see what works. Because I think it's different for everyone. Then I read that maintaining eye contact can be okay for some but not okay for others. So I'm not sure if there is a right or wrong there. I just think that we should just be patient and understanding and try to not mind the behavior that we may find irritating, because it's natural to find it irritating, but we have to make sure that it doesn't affect us, or nor should it affect them. And be respectful, as with every other person you have to interact with. You just have to be respectful. And yes, that's all I can offer, because if I had interacted with someone in the autism spectrum, I think I would have better answers. But I think it really just comes down to doing your research and seeing what works from there.
I agree po, and I learned po from you po and from Sir Ronel na talagang we shouldn't generalize everything, and that they still have preferences. So I think we are moving already to the end of this podcast. So Kuya John, do you have anything else you want to say?
I was gonna say behind every person is a story. So really resonate with what Miss Cheenee said about, some people may show how do I say it, unusual behaviors, but we don't know what the person is going through. And this is especially true with people with mental health conditions. Kasi diba, hindi naman visually manifest ang lahat ng mga mental health conditions. So as much as possible, let's stay patient and understanding. And as much as possible, let's ask the person what they're going through to understand their needs, to make a more inclusive space. I wanted to ask po si Ms. Cheenee if you can share din, ano po ba yung mga resources, mga specific resources po, like maybe your organization has events, or maybe you can recommend your favorite books about the topic or videos that our listeners can consume in their free time about anxiety disorder po, or any other mental health conditions that you want to advocate po, Ms. Cheenee. Meron po ba kayo share?
Actually, I asked our members about this, and someone suggested that there's a YouTube channel called Special Books by Special Kids, and she said that this channel provides insight and knowledge about a variety of unique and common disabilities and disorders, either physical or psychological. And the creator there interacts with the person with disability and shares awareness about their daily lives, strengths, weaknesses, and struggles. And there's also another YouTube channel called Psych to Go, which is a YouTube channel that tackles interesting psychological topics and applying it using daily life situations po. And I think our group, then our organization Habong also holds video call support groups. So we formed a support group of less than 10 people as of now, with a facilitator, and every 2 weeks on Thursday they meet up and they talk about their what they're going through, whether that's good news or something negative happened. And I think it so far the feedback has been remarkable because they they say that opening up and getting support from other people who are struggling as well has been very helpful po.
Thank you for sharing, especially the support groups that your organization does. Kaya naman po, Sir Ronel, like anything you want to promote now with your work, especially with your government work or advocacy work?
Yeah, number one, dapat matuwa na yung mga bulag sa Pilipinas kasi nakarating na dito yung audio-described movies. Meron ng Netflix, maraming movies sa Netflix na may audio-described. Meron na ring mga Tagalog movies na audio-describe. Yung Goyo, yung concert ni Sarah Geronimo, may naka-describe na rin yun. At ang maganda po is yung Resources for the Blind Incorporated, together with other groups of persons who are blind, ay nagbubuo po kami ng mga pamamaraan para magkaroon ng audio-describe law dito sa Pilipinas tulad ng sa Amerika. So darating ho yung panahon na magiging mandate na rin ng mga malalaking productions dito ng pelikula, ng theater, yun hong pagkakaroon ng audio described. No? At kakawing po, kabahagi niyan yung pagkakaroon natin ng Filipino speech engine. Kasi karamihan ng mga materials ngayon nababasa mo sa internet ay in English. Kailangan naman ng mga bulag natin kasi marami hong bulag na gustong mag-aral kaya lang hindi pinag-aral ng gobyerno. Lalo na yung mga nasa rural areas. Gustong-gusto nilang mag-aral pero bibihira po yung nagsisikap kasi mahirap nga naman yung walang braille books, walang audiobooks. Kaya meron po tayong Bookshare Philippines ngayon. Bookshare Philippines. Ito po, thousands of audiobooks. Babayad lang kayo ng 500 pesos isang taon. You will be having access to hundreds of thousands of audiobooks. No? At dumadami na rin po yung mga Filipino collections dyan sa Bookshare Philippines. Para malaman po lahat dyan, doon kayo pumunta sa Resources for the Blind. May website po sila, rbi.org.ph. Ano po? Meron ding Atrieve, kung gusto niyo matuto ng computer. Atrieve for the Blind, turo po sila ng computer. At yung kayo naman po, mga nasa, alam mo yung Lasal, napaka-active ng Lasal community, Lasal St. Benil especially. Meron kayong deaf community at ngayon you're starting to involve with the community of the blind as well. No? Si Pepe doon sa St. Benil. Kasama namin sa audio describe training yan at makakasama natin sa pagbuo ng talasalitaan para tama yung description na gagamitin natin sa ating mga gagawing audio describe movies at pati yung mga museums natin, lalagyan na rin natin ng audio description para, di ba maraming mga bagay na hindi pwedeng hawakan sa mga museums. So yun, i-describe ng isang audio description method para na-appreciate din ng bulag at ng visually impaired yung makikita ninyo sa museum. So maganda po, lumabas kayo sa inyong mga bahay at kayong mga kabataan, mag-reach out kayo sa inyong mga community at alam naman po ng organisasyon na ito, alam nila John at ni Anika, yung aming contact numbers. We would love to connect with you. Let's have a watch party together. Pwede yan, ano? We can organize that for you. Para naman yung mga movies like yung The Helen Keller Story, 50 Shades of Grey, magandang pelikula. Magandang pelikula yung akala
Maganda
lang,
po ba?
akala lang kasi nila yung hina-highlight nila yung mga sexual innuendos, no? Pero relevant lahat yun. At hindi yun magiging bestseller for nothing, ano? Napakaganda ng kwento, no? Pwede rin tayong mag-Spotify, no? Makinig sa Spotify, no? Ako, kung tatanungin ninyo, pagka yung nalulungkot ako, yung mga kanta ko, yung halimbawa yung kay Diana Ross, yung It's My Turn. Ha? Si Steve Green naman yung I Can See at saka Find Us Faithful. So yung mga ganon, kung ano po yung hilig ninyong musika, pwede nating pag-usapan kasi nakaka-access din kami ng Spotify. Sabi ko nga, merong audio-described movies, meron ng mga news sites na halimbawa Philippine Daily Inquirer, yung Rappler. Sila po very open na gawing accessible ang kanilang sites. At itong grupo nila John, no, keep in touch with them and we will be linked by them. Thank you very much for the opportunity and to God be the glory. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much po, Sir Nel and Ma'am Cheenee. Truly, we have been able to open our eyes more on these certain topics that truly need to be talked about here in the Philippines. Ayan. So, maraming salamat po sa pagdalay sa amin, sa pagtulong po para we can, oh my gosh, see? Tingin po, very mahirap na po talaga mag-Filipino. That's the sad thing po in the Philippines. Minsan talaga, Filipino should be talked about more, especially we're Filipinos. But thank you so much very again for being here with us for this podcast. So we would thank you again for sharing your advocacies to us. So without further ado, we would like to give you a certificate of appreciation and it will be given to you later. And so to our listeners out there, we hope that you also gain insights from our speakers tonight or today or wherever you are right now, the amazingness of technology. And we also encourage you to please use the knowledge that you've learned today and ensure that this discrimination of PWDs is lessened, and so that we could be the forefront of change and so that we could vocalize their need for certain things. Because diba, syempre, sometimes we're activists too much that we deafen the noise that they can't be heard anymore. Ayun. So, Kuya John, do you have anything else to say?
Again, this is TIFF Time, Tea with the Initiative Philippines, and we want to thank everyone who supported this program in this episode. Goodbye, guys, and catch you in the next episode.